Let's get started. Welcome back, everyone, to the main stage at Event Sustainability Live. I'm Ed from HiSpace. It's been a pleasure to be hosting this stage today. We've seen some fantastic content. We've got another brilliant panel coming up next. We're looking at the role of physical products and solutions in transforming this event sustainability landscape. So really excited about this one. I would like to thank again our wonderful stage and event sponsors, Evolution Dome, this magnificent inflatable dome. They come in all shapes and sizes. They're perfect for a huge range of events. Fantastic company to work with. They're exhibiting just behind us. So if you do want to chat to those guys, please do go and grab one of the team. We would encourage questions from all of you guys. You can do that in two ways. You can do it through Slido. So you may have the app, otherwise you can go to slido.com. You can join the session using this QR code or using that code there, hashtag ESLMain 2023. Submit the questions through your phone, they'll appear on this screen and the panelists will come to them. If you want to do it old school, we do have a roaming mic, so stick your hand up and someone, I will come to you with a microphone. So either way is good, but please do keep the questions coming. Without further ado, I am delighted to introduce Matt Coyne, who is going to be hosting this panel. Matt.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Good to see a full space straightly after lunch. We were a bit worried about that spot, so thank you very much for coming. My name is Matt Coyne from Waves Connect, so I'm facilitating this discussion today. I'm talking about solutions in the events world and how we can make them more sustainable. So before we begin, could I ask panel to introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit, why you're here, what's your relationship with sustainability?
I'm Ashley Austin, Director of Evolution Dome. So we sponsor the show, but we're also a supplier to the industry, temporary structures and overlay to sport events, conferences, product launches, brand activations. So I'm here as a supplier.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Simpkins. I'm Global CGO at Two Heads. Two Heads are a brand experience agency specialising in live events, brand experience environments, innovation and technology.
Thank you very much, gents. And we should have also had Macy Mitchell here from, I've got to say this right, Branded Biophilia, but unfortunately he can't be here. So if there's anyone else that has a plant life type product that would like to come and take the seat, because it feels incredibly awkward that we're so far away right now. But so we will touch on some of the stuff that Macy did, because it is perfectly relevant to some of the products that we're looking at in sustainability and events. But maybe James, could you tell us a little bit about some of the sustainable experiences that you guys have been delivering at Two Heads?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. So as I said, we're a brand experience agency first and foremost, so we get the great pleasure of supporting our partner brands, and the experiences we create for them come in all different shapes and sizes. Most notably, we do a lot of physical production work, so that requires the use of a lot of materials, logistics, some careful planning and thought around that, but also innovating in that space and looking for new ideas and opportunities to do things differently and to support our clients' needs.
So could you say do things differently? Could you give us an example of something that you have done differently?
Well, I think first and foremost, we go back to why. What's the key objectives that a client is trying to deliver on? They quite often drive the best and most innovative solutions. I think we're working in a world that's operating at different paces, and particularly in the UK, I think we're quite ahead of the curve in terms of some of the sustainable decisions we're making. When we translate that to the global work we do, some areas of the world are playing catch up. They're quite far behind. So we're having to innovate in terms of the way we work with the partners, the suppliers, the local points of production, to help them learn and understand how to use the plethora of materials that are available and the way in which we combine that with content and information that supports the sustainability message. So quite often where we're delivering work with our client brands, they're usually the ones pioneering at these events that are still learning how to become more sustainable, to portray and cast the right image of them as an industry. And we have a great opportunity ahead of us to actually continue to build on that momentum.
Amazing, and we're going to come back to some of those sort of first steps that clients can take, I guess, going down that route. But maybe Ash, So you've had lots of plugs about these wonderful domes that you've seen all around the venue. I've been part of them or in them or something for years. One might look at them and kind of say, it's not very sustainable because you've got to inflate them. You've got to inflate it for 3 days or 5 days or 10,000 people in a ginormous one. So how sustainable is something like these inflatable structures?
So there's a number of things really. Over the past 2 years, we've made a heavy investment into battery and solar storage. I mean, the one downside with an inflatable product is it does need 24-hour power. This year, we've introduced a new fan system, so we're actually using 45% less power within a structure. Small changes like that. I mean, you look at this structure now, it's actually using less power than the AV and lights. You know, it's drawing 4 amps. It's absolutely minimal. The other benefits come, and it's weighing these up. Organisers weighing these up. You know, if you used to use a structure to hold 1,000 people outside, a temporary structure would likely come on 3 to 4 Arctics. Well, we would be 1 Arctic because these pack down. 75% of this is air. Because they pack down so small, they're easy to transport. And the other huge benefit the structures have got is they're insulated, so they're effective to heat and cool. So when you take that element in, it's actually, even with the draw of the power, we're actually more sustainable. The little changes, well, not little, they're quite large in some ways, but as a supplier, we've installed solar panels on our warehouse and office space. So we're producing, everything we produce we use, and we're actually exporting green power back. So, you know, one step. The other steps with the fans changing and the battery storage, you know, we're putting power, batteries and solar into events, so we're actually completely carbon neutral, but actually then using that within the space as well. Sometimes, you know, this time of year you're going to struggle with the solar, but we're still seeing generator runtime from 24 hours down to 6. It's a massive jump, and it's a step in the right direction. You know, we're always going to need some power. You know, it doesn't matter, we wouldn't be here today without electric, but it's doing the right thing and making them first initial steps and working with a supplier that are doing the right things. You know, we've got a target of net zero by 2030, and I honestly believe we'll be there before that.
Amazing, and we're going to come on to that part of asking the right questions, I think, for suppliers later as well. But breaking down some of the tech knowledge or tech speak to non-techie speak, like you say, something like this is 4 amps of power. To the layman in the room, what does that mean? Like, what are they looking for when they're kind of like, I want my event to be a bit more sustainable, I want to use less power, they might not know information about amps, watts, all that kind of thing. So how would you break that down for someone who's really kind of, I want to make a change, but I don't really understand how to report this back to the board who want to make the change?
Yeah, for instance, so we would, hard to explain, put me on the spot a little bit, Matt. to heat something outside a temporary structure of 1,000 people, you would be, or cooling, you'd be looking probably 300 or 400 kilowatts of heat. When you put that into an inflatable structure, you know, you're nearly halving it. So that's a massive fuel saving. Whether that be electric, so it's powered by diesel generators or the grid, or whether that be indirect fired diesel heaters, we've halved that diesel consumption or that energy consumption. In terms of amps, a kettle let's say a T-urn, let's look at a T-urn, that's 3 kilowatts, it's around 10 to 13 amps. So we're half of a T-urn, well less, we're a third of a T-urn at the minute for this. It would be great if the AV guys knew, but I clocked their power supply outside. They've got to double the power supply of what we've got. So they're clearly using more power than we are to do the production. It's all needed, but there's, you know, you can look at it and think it's an unnecessary cost or an unnecessary carbon footprint, but actually when you divide the fact that we've got 7 structures around the show and they turned up in a van and trailer with 2 guys that set them up, and actually start measuring the carbon footprint in a lot of different areas, is where you start to see actually it's not what you can cut out the wrong things.
And so maybe as another practical example, you had an event, I think it was earlier this year, but with Anglian Water, a 10-day event, I think, and you actually have some facts and figures. If you can't remember them, I do have them written down. Yeah,
so we used a battery storage system in there with a generator. It was on a reservoir site, so there was no mains power. There should have been solar on site. There wasn't. The client didn't go for it in the end. So it was a generator and a battery storage system. We reduced the runtime of 24 hours down to 6. And there's suppliers out there, probably on the show floor, I haven't had a good walk around, but people like Pierce Hire, the suppliers out there with this system. We saved on that 10-day event 9 tons of CO2 carbon emissions. It's the equipment's out there. I don't know if you want to touch on it yet about the investment. The organisers have got to, when you get over a week with battery storage, you generally start to see a saving because you've invested in that battery, but you've cut fuel down by 3/4. You're actually seeing that return on investment straight away anyway without doing the right thing. When you get to a 4 to 5 day event, that investment perhaps doesn't cover itself, and it's how much organisers, clients want to do the right thing, really.
And there's a comment come up in one of the questions of 4 amps is the same as running a fridge in a camper van. So to put in
That'll
scale,
do me.
So thank you for whoever submitted that. But I mean, that's incredible, right? Like just that simple, I say simple change, but putting a structure in like this in an event and down to 1 truck and things, I think is absolutely incredible. But James, I want to talk about, you mentioned about luxury brands and the power of sustainability designed experiences, but in combination with sort of content and stuff. Could you just tell us a little bit more about what that means?
I think it comes back to the beginning about the client's brand and the message that they want to send. I think you can approach it in 2 different ways. Either sustainability is at the heart of your, the brand, the client's brand, your supplier's brand, and therefore you want to be obvious in the way in which you manifest that. And then it could be a lot more subtle, and it could be just based on the decisions you're making as an agency or as a business or as a supplier to actually be responsible to the cause of sustainability and the fact that we all need to address it. So where we've been able to deliver the most powerful experiences and where they have become very prevalent and notable is because the client has seen it as a priority and they're willing to communicate on that level through content and innovation. So I think you're kind of doubling down, you're doing what you need to do, but you're able to use materials and make choices around those materials that actually play to the brand's strengths and are backed up by the messages they send. And quite often we're finding brands are not just looking at the materiality or the innovation around these solutions, they're actually looking at the wider cause and the wider pillars of sustainability and actually bringing that to life through content. And that's very powerful. It, of course, relies quite often, content manifests as audiovisual solutions, which is okay because usually you're hiring that audiovisual solution in, or as graphic materials, which are a little bit more difficult to deal with unless you use the right materials and the right suppliers in the right location with the right onward recycling setup. So, I've seen a really interesting use of materials that perhaps can't be as easily recycled from one supplier. I'll name check them because I thought it was a very innovative solution, who are called Moss. They're kind of founded out of the US, but are a global business. And one of their senior leaders talked about graphic materials and the way in which they treat them. So in an event environment like this, there will be a lot of graphic materials. They're taking those materials that they can't easily recycle, they're stripping them down to the smallest possible pieces. They are sending them to a location that are using those materials as an onward life, as fillings for punch bags, for boxing equipment. And I just thought that really stood out to me as somebody who's really thinking through the challenges here of not just delivering that moment in time for brands, but actually thinking about how they can continue the life cycle and the journey of materials. So I think that's something that a lot of agencies are grappling with, the suppliers that they partner with are grappling with as well. And ultimately, if we're always solutions focused, we're going to end up with some very beneficial outputs from the projects we deliver.
And I guess what's really nice about that, thank you for sharing that, by the way. I think what's really nice, that also brings in the community aspect of sustainability, because that could go to local gyms or whatever the centre might be. So I think that's really interesting. One of the bits that we did want to touch on, so Macy from Branded by Ophelia, they produce living walls, so it's plant walls. I think there's 1 or 2 maybe around the show, and they were bringing like the real life into a show. So just to give a bit of a use case, that one plant, I think he said, could do about 12 shows. So instead of having plastic things, it looks nice. It brings a breath of fresh air maybe also to a sort of stale exhibition hall. But one of the bits that he touched on was about event breakdown and the sort of the cleanup. And I think if you've ever been in an event, organised an event, or been here sort of slightly after hours, you'll see piles of rubbish everywhere. It's getting picked up in bins, and I think a lot of it at Excel is being recycled. But those plants are going straight back out, and they've got 12 more shows in them. Are there any more examples like that that you guys can help share that you've seen from sort of products being reused in such a way?
I can take this one first, Ash. I'd seen a really good example recently. We work regularly at the Palais de Festival in South France in Cannes, and the organisers of that particular event, RX or RX France specifically, because they look after that region, have employed a consultant to help them with the sustainability around the venue at the Palais de Festival, and it's something they've been working very hard on, and they've kind of tried to eliminate as much as possible that pile of waste. They recognised it as a specific challenge. They've been monitoring and measuring it for about 18 months now, and they're taking the steps to not just try and own it from a venue point of view, but engage the agencies, the suppliers, the people who are delivering large volumes of work, and they're including them in the discussion and the planning. And the first step they've taken, and just on that point of graphic materials, they recognise that as a challenge, but their biggest waste product was wood and timber materials. So they've taken the step of engaging a team of people that are working with the suppliers. All those materials are going to that place, that actually the wood waste spot, so it can be collected from that small pile that the brands or the suppliers put outside their spaces, and then moved responsibly. And that way, they've got a lot better control. The awareness is much greater from the suppliers because they know they've got to play by the rules. It's not a free-for-all. And actually, there's a bit of reward and recognition for those that do a good job. So from the end supplier point of view, who are partnering with the agencies or the brands, they want to be seen as making the right choices and doing the right things. So actually, when organisers and events that encompass multiple brands start to engage more people, it starts to be very beneficial.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things out there. Sort of the top 3 carpet suppliers now are all offering a recycling service. I think a takeaway as a supplier that I took from meeting James a few months back was actually, as a supplier now, we're pushing to include the recycling charge on the client's invoice, so they have to make a physical decision to take that back off. So trying to push the right thing to do back onto the client. There's other things I think that they've done well at this show, if I'm honest. I think for us, we turned up, the exhibition wheel was built. The graphic will have a legacy where we'll take it back with us and potentially use it when we come back next year. But also, because they've engaged with the audience, like myself, exhibitors early enough, they'll be able to have all this BE matrix built by one supplier, one truck, cutting emissions and things like that. So I think there's things out there, isn't there?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you also can go into venues and how they've restructured. That's probably a bigger discussion. But I think it's the Javits Center in New York. And they've, over the years, spent a huge amount in redevelopment. They found there was huge amounts of queues of the trucks waiting outside to get in, which was causing gridlock everywhere, which was making emissions go up. So very simply building underground, easier access, etc. On top of some wonderful things they're doing. Definitely Google what the Javits Center is doing. There's lots of things at venues like that are starting to change. Excuse me, but maybe we could touch on the cost of sustainability. Some people think there's like the sustainability tax and it is just a little bit of a markup that's going on. Is sustainability expensive?
It's got a cost associated with it in a lot of applications, I think. For instance, the carpet, there's a cost to recycle it, there's a cost to do that. There's also a cost to put it in landfill, but I think obviously there's the right thing to do morally. I think there's a cost with some of it. I think some of it is actually education. I don't know how many people out in the audience actually organise outdoor events, but when you look at the cost with a solar and battery storage system as opposed to running a generator, is when you get over a 6-7 day period, actually it's not a cost and it's investment because the fuel you've saved has already paid off that investment into the battery. I think there's a cost associated with some of it. I don't think it should be considered a cost in a lot of applications. But I think a lot of it is education, and knowing there's products out there that will mitigate it with little cost.
I think working with brands more closely, and over the past 18 months, we've really started to realise that yes, there is a cost attached to some of the sustainable decisions and materials that are utilised, depending on what quality or grade or how they're engineered and made in the first place. But those are decisions that can be made around how the brands want to portray themselves and how we make decisions with them and for them. An example of this can be if you've got a global budget, and some of the projects that we deliver are enormous, some of them are very small footprint. But usually there's a kind of more global budget, a total budget figure that as an agency you might have an appreciation for, but you don't know exactly how it's spent. And I think it's universally recognised that travel, particularly for international events, is one of the biggest contributors to obviously the carbon footprint here. But it's the way in which people travel, and the way in which they travel, if they address that or travel less people, opens up the opportunity for greater investment in materials. They will still ultimately be spending the same. You could say always you should be looking to spend not as little as possible, but spend responsibly. But where we've been working with clients to change their perception about, okay, what is it you need to achieve at that point of delivery as an objective, and how will you travel, can open up lots of other decisions in terms of how you approach an event. I'll use one great example from a very well-known client brand in the UK. Instead of flying to the south of France for the event I talked about earlier, they took the train. And I was in absolute admiration of that, and they said not only did they feel they did something responsible, but they actually really enjoyed the journey.
Now, if only our train system was as good... Oh wait, sorry, wrong session. But speaking of travel, though, there's a number of companies over in Event Tech Live, and you were talking about some of the tech, but there's Crowdcoms as an example up at the front, and their registration kiosks and things. I think they've launched here, maybe, but it's kind of briefcase level, so they don't have to send a separate flight with loads of kit that's heading over there, weeks in advance. It literally can be put in an overhead locker, pending security and all sorts of wonderful stuff like that. But it does mean that one person that's going to set up that event can stick it in their locker. It's not another flight. So that straight away is helping reduce emissions. But there's a really interesting question that's come up on the board, and it's, if sustainability is a priority, why does the cost get passed on to the client? Doesn't this make sustainability less accessible for smaller companies? Really interesting. Would either of you like to start with that?
The cost's got to come from somewhere, isn't it? Let's be honest, right? I think as a supplier, we've got a responsibility, and I think as an organiser, you've got a responsibility to select the right supplier. I think suppliers like us, like people like ourselves, we've invested in solar within our warehouse or office spaces. We've done them kind of things. Picking a supplier that's done that, ultimately, I could pick up the cost to recycle the carpet, but it's going to go on the bill one way or another. It's not, that event has a responsibility and has a budget, and that's got to be managed at that point. It can't be the supplier's problem to manage that sustainability side as well. I do believe as a supplier, we've got to do the right thing, but as a client, I can't be responsible for your green credentials. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I think it's about making smart decisions. It's about making decisions with the clients, with the brands, to help and guide those ultimate solutions. When we talk about cost and measurement, there is a cost for software, there is a cost for people time, and actually it's a notional aspect to what we both do, which is almost aiming to create the data through measurement that ultimately leads to better decisions in the future. And I know obviously Isla and Event Decision are here, and they both support that need. For us, it's about the client wanting to measure and being part of that journey. The notion of doing it, and we would be doing it anyway, is more about them going on the journey with you and for themselves, so that they can understand decisions they can make internally. So you're supporting something wider than just the service you're delivering. You're supporting their need to make change within their own businesses. So data is very powerful. It's been hot on the agenda. It's been the main thing that most of us have been focusing on, because it does help everyone make informed choices.
And so that's one of the earlier questions of which data do you use to calculate your CO2 savings. Maybe you could share how you're doing that.
Well, quite simply, we work with Isla and we use their trace tool, and we work with Event Decision and use their track tool. I think they talked about the names of these tools during the pandemic, kind of happily ended up at that track and trace situation. But it's both of them offer a slightly different service. One is much more self-serving and is very beneficial because you learn a lot from using the system, and the other one is probably a lot more attractive to brands directly because it's provided as a service. But both of them provide very valuable information, and they help you make decisions at the beginning of the process, take stock of where you are during the process, and when you close it. So you've got a brilliant onward journey.
And sorry, I was getting my phone out because I wanted to refresh the screen in case there's more questions. So do ask any more questions, and I can keep them going in there. I may be shocked for saying the next part, but are organisers just looking for vanity metrics when it comes to sustainability? I mean, I saw a show last week that had no carpet, which Event Tech Live and, well, Event Sustainability Live from day one's today. But 10 years ago with Event Tech Live, they've had no carpet. That's one of the reasons they want to go for it. But this event had a 30-foot wall talking about the fact that they had no carpet. It had that year's branding on it. Now, maybe it's gone on and been shredded and put into a boxing bag, like, I don't know. But is it a vanity metric? Is it just kind of like, hey, look, woohoo, we've done this? Or are people actually buying your solutions or services because there's an element of green behind it?
From a client brand point of view, I think it's much deeper rooted in a longer term ambition. One particular brand we've been working with actually said on a piece to camera, it's been almost 10 years in the making for them in terms of bringing their visions to life and delivering upon their objectives in a very real and truthful way. And that comes back to communicating the right way and delivering materials in the right way. I think we're going to go through a phase and continue on a phase of being very obviously sustainable where we can, and I think we'll drift away from that, and it will become more inherited and natural behaviour to just do it automatically without having to have the need to shout about it, because once you reach that threshold of more people are doing it than not, then it becomes less of a priority to display it obviously or to manifest it obviously, and people just accept it's going to happen. So it's an inertia thing. I think, to your point, saying we've done this is because they're wanting to inform the audience, but finding the right way to communicate it is often the challenge.
So Ash, maybe for you, have you won clients because of some of the sort of green initiatives that you've been working on?
I can honestly say no. The investment we've made into solar and battery storage, we still struggle to push it to clients. I think it comes down to budget, and I think the clients that we're, like James said, where it's deep rooted, is within what they are. I think it's a lot easier. But no, in honesty, I think everyone wants to do the right thing, perhaps, but perhaps some of the smaller agencies don't have the budget to do the right thing. I think it probably needs discussing at an earlier stage rather than, later down the line of when they're planning these things. But I think there's some smoke and mirrors, I'm sure.
So maybe on the smoke and mirrors theme, what's the biggest challenge faced when selecting sustainable partner? Maybe I'm asking the wrong people. If there's any organisers in the room, what are the biggest challenges that you face when selecting a sustainable partner? Whilst you're thinking and busily typing away at questions that are going to come up on the board, which there is in a minute, but maybe what are some of the challenges that people ask you when they ask about these sorts of initiatives?
Operating as an agency that delivers services globally, for us, first and foremost, it's about the geographic location of our suppliers, our partners. When we're delivering events at a global scale and we're taking brands all over the world, for us what's become critical, and it sort of answers this question that's appeared here, is we're having to do a lot more work in terms of engaging and checking and monitoring our suppliers and collaborating more closely with them, not only to understand that they're aligned with the requirement and the needs, but also that we're in a way sharing our knowledge and helping them evolve their production methods, their material sourcing, the way in which they deliver and kind of address the logistics needs of those projects. And that's the investment. It goes back to that point, okay, not all of that doesn't get passed back to the brands or to the clients. That's our investment in the future of our services, and something that we take very seriously. Although we're a consulting agency, a lot of the work we do requires physical delivery. And for that, we need a vast network of credible suppliers that are delivering on those needs and actually delivering truthfully on those needs.
And for the other question that's come up, everyone's talking about carpet recycling, and maybe it's an obvious thing, and it's an obvious visual thing when you walk around as well. But what about graphic recycling, fabric and PVC? Do we have any solutions for this? Are you two aware? I mean, we've talked about the shredding, but maybe Ash?
So I will just touch on that. What is the life cycle? So the life cycle, we've got a kit that's 7 years old, it's still being used. So the life cycle, it goes back onto a pallet, it goes back to storage, and it's used and used. PVC that you just touched on there, we're actually now working with the supplier where the PVC will be fully recyclable, so we'll be able to reuse. They can make it into plastic cups, all sorts of crazy things. So what there is, it's coming. I think it's slow, but it's definitely coming, them steps. Structures like this at the end of their life, there still will be elements. The zips will be reused, the fans will be reused, the material will be reused to create bags for new structures. So there's a legacy to the product. When you look at the materials back in an exhibition environment, the PVC's traditionally been very hard to reuse and recycle, but it is coming.
So there's lots of questions coming in now. Thank you very much. But before I go on to that, what are maybe some of the key steps that organisers can take when selecting sort of new, again, sustainable initiatives feels huge. But what are some of the steps they can take to begin down that path if they're kind of like, I don't want to just tick a box and make an actionable change? What are some of the first things that they might be able to do?
I think some recent learnings from an agency perspective here is, and I think I saw, again, a question pop up here about, okay, how do you, from an investment point of view, go from sustainable to even more sustainable or even more powerful from a sustainability point of view? Sometimes it's down to those initial decisions that really reinforce that kind of mission to do more with less, okay? So, there are many brands in many sectors that are facing financial challenges, and some of them are boxing very clever, and we've been going on that journey with them. I'm going to use an example here of being smart around venue selection. So quite often we're doing projects that need a venue, a home, rather than a shared environment, such as this here today, where they will very carefully select a venue not only that has good sustainability and sustainable credentials, but also aligns much more closely with their brand needs, their brand image, what they want to do from an engagement point of view. And quite quickly, you've got an environment that's ready-made for your needs, and then you can invest what you do have in enhancing that. So that's a way to double down. If you were to go the other route and choose a venue because it happens to be in a good postcode or it's a good location, but it is a blank canvas, you're probably going to have to put more energy and more investment into owning it from a brand point of view. So actually seeking some alignment at the beginning and understanding the true purpose of that event can create some dramatic positive impact.
So there's a few questions come in about cost again, so I'd kind of like to touch on it. And sorry, it's just gone from my screen. It's possibly been voted up. All clients are budget focused in the current environment. How do you sell them more sustainable solutions over cheaper, not as sustainable solutions? How do you approach that conversation?
As a supplier, I'm in exactly the same boat whoever read that question.
I mean, I guess it comes back to one of the travel questions, comments that came up earlier, and there's a huge amount, broadly speaking, in events of proof of value of the event. So it's the ROI of your event, and if you're doing a multiple exhibit program, so 20 events around the world or something like that, it's proving the real value of you being at those events. And if you used to send 10 people to an event in Singapore and 5 in South America and 10 in America, if you're understanding the value that you're deriving from that event, forget the green part of it. And if you realize that actually you could send 2 people, well, you've probably just saved yourself $5,000 in flights and travel and food and accommodation and stuff for those few days. So some of that budget that you think might not be there probably is there. You've just got to look at some of the other aspects of the event that you're doing, delivering, servicing, whatever it might be, and take some of that out of that and put it into these initiatives, right? I don't know if that was a question or a comment, but if you want to add to that, that's fine.
I agree.
Okay, so there's another one. We often come across venues or suppliers that claim to be sustainable without any context as to how they achieve this. How can we best measure sustainability? It's a big question. It's a good one.
It'd be nice if there's some sort of accreditation within the industry, if I'm honest. I think we're missing it. There's ISO 14001, a couple of others, I think, isn't there?
Yeah, there are many, and we as an agency, we've been looking at B Corp, not only because of its relationship in terms of sustainability, but in terms of the wider aspects of sustainability and what matters to us as an agency and what matters to our brands. For that's just as powerful. But all of these things are obviously notional. There's a lot of agencies, a lot of suppliers, a lot of organisers in the industry, and I think mostly you can really understand if people are being truthful about what they're doing because they speak with a level of knowledge and expertise. BMA House as an example, as a venue, you go there and you instantly feel the decisions they've made, the way in which they operate, the way in which they provide food and menu choices. You know they're walking the walk. And I think that's what brands want to see as well. They want to be truthful to themselves and they want to manifest these events in a very truthful way. So they are going to seek venues that may have some form of accreditation, but also are engaging them at the correct level, not just at the surface level. I mean, I think we're fed up with talking about plastic water bottles. It's great that there was a message, bring your water bottle to this event. It's a very simple thing, but it still gets missed.
And I think it's also, diving into it, there are venues that maybe have more budget to promote these types of services and solutions. Like Amsterdam Rye is another very good venue for doing that, and they go right into how their food is used and recycled and all that kind of stuff. So I guess the information's there, but also perhaps education is the most important part. That's where I love things like this, Event Sustainability Live. But maybe educating the various audiences. Have you had much experience of being involved in companies helping educate teams about what's going on?
One of the things we've endeavoured to do as an agency, and actually what has delivered some of the most powerful relationships and work with brands, has been us underpinning initial discussions with clients in a sort of workshop format. And we actually held one earlier today in one of the roundtable environments where we're being very open and honest about where the challenges lay, where some potential solutions are, and how people can make a start and actually kind of jump that first hurdle, cross that bridge, get it underway. Because although I think for the majority of us, we feel like we've been living and breathing it for a long time, a number of years, there is a lot of brands out there who have perhaps been putting it off. They have been finding it challenging to get it up and running. And sometimes that power comes from within. Ideally, it would come from leadership within brands and corporates, but quite often it comes from the generations within the agency where it matters most, and there's a pressure that builds from the ground up. That's a good pressure, and we want to encourage that, and we want to support those that want to make the change, and we can do that by supporting them in knowledge and expertise. Imagine a place where a very junior member of staff wants to push the agenda within their brand, with their boss, and they can walk away with a set of information where they've workshopped that out with an agency, not necessarily two heads, but any agency, a group of suppliers, other brands, where they can take some really good guidance and information into the board and say, here are the benefits, it can be cost neutral, these are the decisions we can make as a business.
So we have only a few minutes left. If you're not able to type or submit questions and you'd like to ask one with a roving mic, do just stick your hand up and we could bring that microphone round. Wherever the roving microphone is. There we go. Yeah.
Hi. We've spoken about, Ash, you talked about a client not going for solar, so you're going battery. James, you talked about education, but you also made a point about getting to a point where we've got over the inertia. We're a supplier, I'm from Crowdcoms, and I think it's up to us as suppliers to not give them that option. So, we do a simple thing, badges, right? That's got plastic on the back of it. This one doesn't. We don't do them. Don't give them the choice. So I think, is there a point that we can accelerate this as suppliers by saying, this is your choice?
I think there is, to a degree. I agree with you. I think the takeaway from meeting James a few months ago, where we was offering clients the recycling of the carpet, and it was just easy, not turned away. But now that's actually included in there. It's so hard for them to take out. We could include it in the cost of the carpet, don't get me wrong, but then do you as a supplier potentially push yourself out of that contract? Do they measure you against another carpet supplier that's not got that built in? So we're adding it as a line item and making it, they've got to make that difficult decision to take it out, and they've got to, hopefully they understand that they're not doing the right thing and make it more conscious for them not to do it. But
yeah, I think there's an element of drag along here, and certainly when we're engaging new customers, actually there's less friction. It's more easy to have that conversation. There's more emphasis behind it. In fact, brands particularly are looking for agencies and suppliers that are going to help them move forwards. So it's a very powerful thing, and I believe that ultimately there'll be this kind of impasse where those that are doing it are going to end up with the lion's share of the work, and those that aren't are going to start to fall back and perhaps for whatever reason disappear or become integrated. So I think that brands are wising up, suppliers are wising up. The work that Isla and Event Decision and all the other suppliers that are here today are doing is making a huge difference, and we're all in it together. In our round table, it would have been lovely to have brands and potential customers in there. We had other agencies, organisers, publications, venues. Do you know what? We're here to share and help each other. So I know that seems very easy to say, but genuinely we did that today.
Great question, thank you. Whilst I load you up with your final thought or takeaway for anyone in the room, you can also check out the Ops Nest. They're sort of straight down the middle, but they have a one change initiative. And I think the idea is to change just one thing every month. You can't do everything at once. It's almost impossible to change everything that you do. If you just try, making a cup of tea with your left hand and not your right, you realize it takes quite a while to practice that. So it's the same in sustainability. So definitely go check out the Ops Nest. They've got a ton of free resources on that kind of thing. But over to you guys, a final takeaway for everyone.
Well, John Ash, do you know?
I think, just going back to yours and the Ops Nest, what they're doing, I think it's incredible, and I think I'm going to take a visit out there this afternoon. I think it's a very daunting thing to go, we've made the target of going net zero by 2030. It's a very daunting thing to do, and I think that one step a month is the best way to look at it. It's slow, steady paced, rather than we're going to do this by then, and it can become overwhelming and it's not achievable.
I think my final takeaway is on that point, and the point, again, great question that you asked. For us, we've been prioritising making this real and livable for our own team. We're 100 people globally, so the first thing we needed to do was take everybody on the journey with us, and it's the small decisions we've made as an agency, as leaders. The most recent thing we have done is to deploy an electric car scheme, a salary sacrifice scheme that gives all of our employees, once they've been in the agency long enough, access to electric vehicles so that they can join that journey as part of their journey to work, as their journey in life. And those things take a lot of energy and time to set up. They seem like simple things, but they can make a big difference.
Well, Ash Austin from Evolution Dome, they are based just behind us if you want to chat to them afterwards, and James Simpkins from Two Heads. You don't have a stand, but you'll be around for a little bit. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.